quietly stocking up the precious metal. They added hundreds of tons to their reserves last year alone.
Hello and welcome to Firstpost America, your home for the biggest stories shaping the US and the world. I'm Kerry Johnston, live from the Firstpost studios. Our top story on the show today. America reels from another deadly immigration enforcement shooting, but who will be held responsible? Also on the program, as the US freezes under record cold and ice, can power grids and emergency crews keep millions safe through the storm? The Trump administration unveils its national security strategy with key implications for the country's rivalry with China. And what if the snacks you can't stop eating were engineered by the same companies that hooked millions on cigarettes? We begin in the city of Minneapolis, where a second American civilian has been shot and killed by Immigration and Customs Enforcement during an operation. Massive protests have erupted across the US after the deadly shooting of Alex Pretti. Well, the dispute has taken on a political tone, with many criticizing federal tactics and calling for accountability. Demonstrators have been making their feelings heard as they move through the city. Former President Barack Obama said that Pretti's shooting should serve as a wake-up call, warning that fundamental American values are under growing threat. And former President Bill Clinton also delivered a blistering critique of the Trump administration, saying peaceful protesters across the country have been arrested, beaten and tear-gassed. Well, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz has called on President Donald Trump to withdraw thousands of federal agents from the state, warning that the operation is putting American lives at risk.
We believe in law and order in this state. We believe in peace. And we believe that Donald Trump needs to pull these 3,000 untrained agents out of Minnesota before they kill another person. And we're up here telling another story of a Minnesotan just trying to live their life without the interference.
Walz has also refused a request from the Trump administration to repeal state sanctuary policies and provide access to Medicaid, food assistance and voter registration data. Meanwhile, authorities in Minneapolis urged federal authorities to conduct immigration operations with discipline, humanity and integrity.
To President Trump, this is a moment to act like a leader. Put Minneapolis, put America first in this moment. Let's achieve peace. Let's end this operation, and I'm telling you, our city will come back. Safety will be restored. We're asking for you to take action now to remove these federal agents.
Well, with emotions running high, protesters gathered across Minneapolis to condemn ICE operations. One sign read, "Nurses demand justice for Alex." As raids continue, residents have organized warning systems and clashes have broken out amid growing public discontent with the administration's immigration strategy.
It's really horrific. I mean, the act itself was crazy, and the policy behind it is absolutely insane. It's fascism in America, so it's really bad. But I don't know, feel helpless.
As questions mount, a federal judge has ordered agents not to destroy or alter any evidence related to the shooting. A court hearing brought by state and county officials is scheduled later today. President Trump has attributed the deaths of 2 American citizens in Minneapolis to Democratic leadership in the state and city. He accused them of failing to cooperate with his administration's immigration enforcement campaign. Well, Trump said Democrats run sanctuary cities and states and are refusing to work with the enforcement agencies. Well, Alex Pretti, a 37-year-old intensive care nurse, was shot dead on January 24th. His death comes just weeks after another U.S. citizen, Renee Good, was killed by federal agents in the same city. Federal agencies claim Pretti approached Border Patrol officers with a loaded handgun during an operation against a nearby suspect and had violently resisted attempts to disarm him. They maintain an agent fired multiple shots in self-defense.
When politicians, community leaders, and some journalists engage in that heated rhetoric we keep talking about, when they make the choice to vilify law enforcement, calling law enforcement names like Gestapo or using the term kidnapping, that is a choice that is made. There are actions and consequences that come from those choices. And then when someone chooses to listen to a politician, a so-called journalist, a community leader that spouted that type of vilification towards law enforcement or anything else, when you choose to listen to that, that is a choice, and there are consequences and actions there also. I think we saw that yesterday.
However, eyewitnesses say that Pretti was simply holding a mobile phone while filming agents in a snow-lined street and attempting to shield other protesters as federal officers pushed and pepper sprayed them. They say Pretti was forced to the ground by several agents.
Well, he was walking and stuff, and then the ICE just jumped out of nowhere and just started tackling and tussling with him. He was just walking, and they just surrounded, and he slipped on the ice, and they started tussling with him. And then they hit him in the head with a canister, and then he started tussling with them, and then they shot him. They just killed him right there. He was unarmed. He was just walking. He didn't have no gun or nothing and stuff, he was just dead.
Well, as mourners leave flowers and candles at the scene of the shooting, this case has become another flashpoint in the broader controversy in the US about policing protest and the human cost of the Trump administration's immigration raids. Well, for more on this, we're now joined by David Schultz, who's a professor of political science and legal studies at Hamline University, joining us live from St. Paul, Minnesota. Welcome to the program. So, to what extent can President Trump be accused of trying to deflect the issues here by attempting to blame Democratic leaders for the excesses of immigration enforcement?
Well, he's clearly trying to deflect it and shift the blame away. But what's important to understand here is a couple of different things. If we go back to both the Biden presidency and back to the Obama presidency, they deported far more individuals than Trump has done so, but in a very peaceful way and in a way that followed rule of law. And what the basic problem we're seeing here is how the Trump administration is a couple of things. First, it's trying to force states into submission, to basically coerce them into taking certain types of practices which states are not obligated to follow. States do not have to cooperate with the national government in terms of immigration. They can obstruct, but they don't have to cooperate. Individuals have what we call First Amendment free speech rights and rights to protest, all of that peacefully. So one, it's about the presidency, Trump presidency, trying to force states to do certain things, but it's also about the tactics that are being used. That if we keep in mind that immigration is basically supposed to be a civil matter, not a criminal matter, one can raise questions about all types of tactics here. There's been accusations that ICE is not using what's called search warrants to arrest people, that it's using excessive force, it's breaking into people's homes, it's profiling people on the basis of their race. It's been a very, very violent process compared to previous presidencies. So this is both about what they're doing and how they're doing it, which is the heart of the objections that are going on here. And Trump is trying to basically say to people, no. It's the Democrats, it's the Democratic states that are responsible for this violence that's going on.
You mentioned former presidents there, and in fact, former presidents Clinton and Obama have severely criticized the action of federal agents. Obama saying it's a wake-up call for Americans. But what can ordinary citizens actually do?
This is a really tough question here because, on the one hand, there's a lot of law that favors the national government in terms of doing what it's doing, in terms of being able to send ICE agents in, but there are clearly limits that are being challenged. But for the average citizen, again, in theory, there's supposed to be a right to do peaceful protests, a right to be able to photograph or video agents doing their job. Individuals have a right to criticize. I mean, I find it ironic, where you had on a couple minutes ago, the head of the ICE operations here saying that if you call police certain names, if you say certain things, there are consequences. Well, he's sort of suggesting that if you accepted his standard regarding what you're allowed to say or not say, that Donald Trump also would have been liable for inciting a riot back on January 6, 2021. So there's clearly a double standard here, that if people have a right to be able to criticize the government, to call the police whatever they want, and ICE officers, as any law enforcement officers, are supposed to be trained not to let that stuff affect them, trained to act like professionals, trained to restrain from using force. And so, again, there's this concerted effort that's being pushed by the Trump administration to push the onus, to push the blame onto protesters and people exercising what's supposed to be their human rights or their democratic rights within the United States.
What does then Donald Trump's core support base make of this? And indeed, fellow Republicans in the administration, are they all fully behind the president?
Well, this is interesting. I suspect that his core base of voters, most of them are still with him. We did see over the weekend several members of Congress who are Republicans starting to say at this point, maybe it's time to pull ICE agents out. But the more important place to look at this point is back in 2024, Donald Trump benefited from a lot of swing voters swinging in his direction to help him win the election. We have polling data that is suggesting right now that a lot of these swing voters have moved away from Donald Trump. And again, some polls are suggesting about 70% of Americans at this point do not support the tactics being used by the Trump administration. So from a political perspective, maybe his hardcore base is still with him, but he's clearly has alienated the swing voters, those more moderate Republicans and truly independent voters who really helped him to victory 2 years ago.
David Schultz, we appreciate your insights. Thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Now, a vast winter storm has tightened its grip on the United States, turning everyday life into a test of endurance across nearly 2/3 of the country. From Texas to New England, heavy snow, thick ice and brutal Arctic air have combined into a weather system that forecasters are describing as one of the most dangerous of the season. Winter storm warnings have stretched across the eastern third of the country, covering 118 million people. Another 157 million are under extreme cold alerts, with temperatures plunging far below normal. In parts of the northern plains, wind chills dropped close to minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit, cold enough to cause frostbite.
This is certainly a rare storm in that it does have a very big scope. We are talking about this storm system taking up a good swath of the country, millions of Americans feeling the winter chill.
Well, the storm began developing late on Friday and strengthened as it moved east. By Sunday, it was dumping snow, sleet and freezing rain over major population centers, including Chicago, Philadelphia, New York and Boston. In the mid-Atlantic and the south, snow turned to ice, coating roads, trees and power lines. On Sunday, a private jet crashed as it was taking off from a main airport with 8 aboard. The US aviation regulator, however, could not confirm that the adverse weather had played a role in the accident. But air travel has been severely disrupted. More than 11,000 US flights were cancelled on Sunday alone, on top of thousands already scrubbed the day before. Ronald Reagan National Airport in Washington was effectively shut down. Airports serving New York, Philadelphia and Charlotte cancelled at least 80% of scheduled departures. And on the ground, conditions were just as chaotic. More than 1 million homes and businesses lost electricity across 8 states, from Texas to the Carolinas. Well, the blackout risk has been made worse by the extreme cold. Officials warn that Tuesday could set a new winter demand record as people turn up their heaters.
This weekend is going to be cold, it is going to be windy, and above all else, it is going to be a weekend where your city is prepared. I will say that one thing that a number of New Yorkers have shared with me is we seem to have large snowstorms every 10 years. It was 96, it was 06, it was 16, it's 26. We're going to be ready.
The storm has already claimed lives. In Louisiana, 2 people were confirmed dead from hypothermia. And in New York, 5 people were found dead outdoors over the weekend. And in Texas, authorities confirmed 3 deaths, including a 16-year-old girl killed in a sledding accident. Officials have not formally linked all the deaths to the weather, but the danger is clear.
The snowstorm we've been expecting is now underway, but it is brutal. It is bone-chilling, and it is dangerous. We are anticipating the longest cold stretch and the highest snow totals the state has seen in several years.
Meanwhile, President Trump has approved federal disaster declarations for more than a dozen states. Meteorologists say the storm is being driven by what's known as a stretched polar vortex, allowing Arctic air to spill far south. And even after the system moves offshore on Monday, another surge of cold air is set to follow, locking much of the country into days of freezing temperatures. People across states have been making last-minute trips to grocery stores as they prepare for more hazardous conditions.
We have lots of firewood already, so just make sure that we have that, and then the basics, canned food, easy to cook meals, chargers are charged, and everyone has everything they need to keep their electronics going at the house.
Of course, the snow will eventually stop, but as millions wait for power to return and travelers remain stranded, questions remain over America's preparedness for such conditions, climate change, and the impact on people's lives. Well, still to come on the program, Trump's penguin meme may have had an icy response, but the internet reveals the cold, hard question: is the penguin in the wrong place? But first, let's examine how the United States is rethinking its global military posture. The Indo-Pacific is firmly at the center of Washington's defense strategy. The Pentagon says it will boost military capabilities in the Indo-Pacific to ensure China cannot block American access to what it called the world's new economic center of gravity. The new U.S. National Defense Strategy outlines 2 key priorities: defending the U.S. homeland with specific focus on the Western Hemisphere, and deterring China in the region. The strategy document says that America's security depends on its ability to engage in the Indo-Pacific from a position of strength. It also outlines plans to establish a strong defense along the First Island chain. Now, that stretches from Japan and Taiwan through the Philippines to Southeast Asia. The idea is to limit China's ability to project power and ensure open military and commercial access across the region. Now, while the US has clearly outlined its defensive lines, the language reveals how Washington wants to manage its rivalry with Beijing. Notably, the tone on China is more measured than President Donald Trump's 2018 defense strategy. The new document has no mention of Taiwan, the self-ruled island China considers its own. Washington says it is not seeking to dominate or humiliate Beijing. Instead, the goal, it says, is to prevent China from dominating the US or its allies. Beyond the Indo-Pacific, the US defense strategy outlines concerns of what it called growing adversarial influence around Greenland, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Panama Canal. Well, Washington says it will devise military options to protect access to these critical areas. These priority areas are in line with President Trump's recent security posturing, especially over Greenland.
I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force. All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland.
Well, the defense policy describes Russia as a persistent but manageable threat to NATO's eastern flank, with US troop presence in Europe set to be reassessed. Meanwhile, in West Asia, Iran has been called the primary threat, while Israel has been described as a model ally. The document stresses that regional partners must carry most of the security burden there, but the US reserves the right to act decisively if needed. In essence, this defense strategy signals a firmer American posture. It may contain less ideology, but in practical terms, the US is still maintaining its power and giving itself continued military options. Now, Donald Trump has officially waddled into the meme economy. He did it by embracing the internet's favorite existential penguin meme trend. But the internet was quick to give it the cold shoulder by fact-checking the bird and indeed the man. It seems that the icy geography was all wrong. Our report explains more.
In the latest episode of Meme-Filled Geopolitics, the United States has found a new way to discuss Greenland. It comes via a wandering penguin having an existential crisis. U.S. President Donald Trump, who has never quite let go of his dream to acquire Greenland from Denmark, has now embraced the internet's favorite melancholy bird, the nihilist penguin. The trend, which has been floating around online for nearly 2 decades, comes from Werner Herzog's 2007 documentary Encounters at the End of the World. The original footage shows a lone Adelie penguin breaking away from its colony and marching purposefully and puzzlingly towards the vast emptiness of Antarctica. Over the years, the clip evolved into a meme symbolizing existential dread, defiance, and the very human urge to walk away from everything. Earlier this month, the clip went viral on social media when users called it a symbol of modern existential burnout. Leaning enthusiastically into the trend, the White House posted an AI-generated image of Trump strolling alongside a penguin towards the icy mountains. In the visual, the penguin clutches the U.S. flag, while the mountains are draped with Greenland's flag. The White House captioned the post as, "Embrace the penguin." There was just one tiny, internet-breaking problem. Penguins do not live in Greenland, or anywhere in the Arctic, or anywhere near polar bears, foxes, or wolves, for that matter. The seabirds are overwhelming Southern Hemisphere residents, with the largest populations in Antarctica. Others live off the southern coasts of South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, South America, and islands near Antarctica. Greenland, meanwhile, sits firmly in the northern hemisphere. Social media users were quick to pounce with their memes. Apart from people pointing out that penguins are not found in Greenland, there were several others who had their own opinions. For example, one user pointed out a problem with how the penguin's footprint is of the size of a man, while another person replaced the penguin with a polar bear. In another hilarious image, the penguin was seen telling Trump that the land where they are headed is not Greenland. One user even commented on the intelligence quotient of the Trump administration. Echoing similar sentiments, another user called the post was embarrassing. The meme moment comes as Trump has once again ramped up his Greenland rhetoric. After floating the idea of acquiring the territory soon after taking office last year, he has recently sharpened his tone. For now, though, the internet seems less concerned about tariffs and more focused on one burning question. If Trump is embracing the penguin, could someone please hand him an atlas, too?
Now, finishing an entire bag of potato chips or eating far more donuts than planned may often just be seen as an indulgence or a harmless lack of self-control. What if it isn't that simple? Consider this. More than 40% of America is obese, millions more overweight. The United States Health Secretary has just dropped a weighty bombshell over why he thinks this is the case. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says America's obesity crisis may have been engineered, not accidentally, but deliberately. According to him, the same companies that once hooked millions of people onto smoking have also helped design the ultra-processed foods that people struggle to stop eating today. In a 7/7 WABC radio interview, Kennedy Jr. accused big tobacco companies of reshaping the modern food industry. He says tobacco giants looked for a new product when cigarette lawsuits mounted and regulations were tightened. That new product was food.
They used chemicals and softeners to hijack our brains. The food tastes good, it smells good, but it has no nutrition, so it doesn't fill you up. So you keep stuffing your pie hole all day. That's what makes Americans obese.
In the 1980s, companies like Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds bought major food brands such as Kraft, General Foods and Nabisco. These are household names producing Oreos, macaroni and cheese and Lunchables. Kennedy Jr.'s claim is not that tobacco is mixed into food. Instead, he says that the science of addiction, which was once used to perfect cigarettes, has been redirected towards engineering food that keeps people eating. Well, these are foods designed to trigger cravings, encourage repeat consumption and make quitting them surprisingly difficult. And science is now catching up. Researchers say ultra-processed foods can behave like addictive substances, triggering compulsive eating patterns similar to those seen with alcohol and tobacco. Well, the US is the biggest market for ultra-processed food consumption, followed by the UK, Australia, South Africa and Mexico. These foods are not made in home kitchens, they're built in factories. The ingredients are essentially broken down, altered and reassembled. They're packed with sugar, salt, fats and flavor enhancers that make eating effortless and irresistible. In the United States, they account for nearly 60% of daily calories, and high consumption of these foods has been linked to numerous health problems, including greater risk of heart disease, obesity, depression, and anxiety. A University of Kansas study supports Kennedy Jr.'s concern, suggesting tobacco firms may have applied addiction-driven strategies to processed foods. By the early 2000s, tobacco companies largely exited the food business, but Kennedy Jr. says they left behind a powerful legacy, a food system optimized for craving and not nutrition. He calls it a public health emergency and is part of his push to make America healthy again. A call to rethink how food is engineered, sold and regulated. But there's one thing the US Health Secretary has not touched upon: smoking itself. Many would say that for someone to blame tobacco firms for a health crisis and not condemn smoking is an obvious contradiction. But if Kennedy Jr.'s claims are true, then perhaps the US obesity crisis is not just about self-control, but also about a business model designed to keep you coming back to those sweet calorific treats again and again. That's it on the show for today. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks very much indeed for watching. Bye-bye. The world doesn't fit in boxes, so why should your news? From battlefields to negotiation tables, from internet outrage to real-world injustice. The conversations everyone is having and the ones they're avoiding. It's the same show, but this new year, Firstpost America gets a new look. I'm Kerry Johnston, and this is Firstpost America. Hello and welcome to Firstpost.